Hey class, happy Monday and welcome to week 3. Hopefully you had a great weekend. Once again, I'd like to commend you for all the great work that you've done in the class thus far. Great discussions, excellent papers. Please use the feedback that I've given you to help you to move forward. Quick reminders on the discussion. Please make sure that you respond to more than a minimum in order to earn full credit. Support your work with in-text citations and references following APA. Check your grammar. Quickly on the papers, do not rely on Word, Perla, any of the programs to get the citations and references correct. They're mostly correct. But in many cases, you've got to make some adjustments to get them perfect. So be careful. That's why you see my feedback. So if you get a little concerned or frustrated and you see my feedback and you tell me that you used the Word or Perla, it doesn't matter. It's not always correct. That's been my experience. So just use my feedback and rely on the APA OWL website. The tips that we've provided, and learn to put the references and citations in yourself following APA. I can assure you now that those shortcuts are not beneficial to you in the future. It's best to learn citations and all your APA now. It's going to benefit you in the future, or at least know where to go look it up using the APA manual or the OWL at Purdue, along with our tips and what's available at the library. If you're struggling, any questions, even if you're not struggling, if you just need a little extra help, I'd encourage you to use the Student Success Center at Anna Maria College. It's free tutoring. Don't let the word tutoring scare you off. And make you feel as if you're a remedial student. We're all remedials. I can tell you, we all need help on APA and writing at some period of time. So don't let that scare you off. I encourage you to use the Student Success Center, take advantage of the free tutoring. Lots of good work there. Dennis and those guys over there, the team will work hard to help you moving forward so that you can progress and do well. I've used it at other schools that I've attended, similar programs, the centers that they offer, and I'd encourage you to use the AMC Student Success Center because it is very beneficial to you. So what are we doing this week? We're moving forward. Remember in my announcement, I hope you read my announcement. Please do so if you have not. It's important to do that because I assure you, when I grade your paper, grade your assignment, lots of times I'll have students email me and ask me a question or disagree with my assessment of their feedback, and I'll say, my question is, did you read the announcements? So please read those announcements. They're designed to help you, not to hinder. I know it's a lot of information, but so is a class. Lot to grasp, and I want to give you that information to help you do well going forward. As I mentioned in the tips that I shared in the announcements today, this morning, everything that we do, we're building the house, so to speak. They're cornerstones. Everything that we do in this class, although we're not writing an actual research proposal, when you move forward to work on your capstone project, etc., I can assure you that you have to build. What we're doing here is we're building the house. We're building those bricks. We're building that foundation to help you in the future. And that's why it's so important to use what we learn here each week, to take good notes and focus really well on the material so that you can lay those bricks, if you will. We're building that house on a solid foundation versus sand, if you will, on dirt. It needs to be a solid foundation. So that's why it's important to read the announcements, use the feedback, and pay close attention to the material. If you're simply scanning the material, It's basically the chapters in the book and those tips. I guarantee you it's going to be challenging in the future, so pay close attention to what we're doing. So what are we doing this week? Just real quickly, our assignment is to read chapters 4 and 10 in the textbook. Just real quickly, the planning, sort of planning your research project, that's covered in chapter 4 this week. We'll talk a little bit about that. And in the beginning, we sort of think broadly about the problem as it arises out of a particular area. As you've heard me mention this before, we have to narrow our purpose, narrow our study, our problem in the future. And so that's why it's important to pay close attention to these things in the information so that we can narrow. We'll narrow. Whoever your instructor is, when they help you with the capstone, that may be something that you hear them say. That's something I always heard, from my, when I was in a master's program, and in doing my doctoral dissertation, is narrow. So you have to narrow the topic, and then narrow that problem statement as you move forward. And it's helpful to understand what you're studying. Are we studying people, things, ideas, etc.? So you'll know that. Many of you obviously will be using some of the papers that we've learned from the Executive Fire Officers Program, or problems within your department, and so forth. So they may be things or people. Think about the kinds of data that you need, participants, research, equipment, and skills. We'll have to determine the general approach to the study. It may be across different disciplines. The methodology, we talk about methodology, methodology is easy to get confused about some of those different techniques that we use. We'll talk a little more about methodology later on, but I want you to pay close attention to that in your textbook. There's different methodologies that we will use, and I'd encourage you. Sometimes it can be time consuming when you get to the point, again, not writing a research paper, when you get to the point of researching your methodology. The professor will help you with that because it can be very confusing. And then again, there's different data sets. We may take a look, or different data. We may use primary or secondary data. Primary data are sort of closest to the truth, the source, and then secondary data are derived from that primary data. And it's sort of like building a sandwich. I talked about building a house, but primary and secondary data is like the sandwich. What's most important, the bread or the meat that you put on there, and then the cheese, and then the mayonnaise or whatever. So that's the primary and secondary data. The meat could be the primary, and then adding everything else, we derive data from those secondary sources: the cheese, the meat, the lettuce, whatever. Different data collections, we have to determine the best ways to collect data. You'll get some of that information here. There's limitations on the data. Let's see. And then there's also an interesting and important consideration when we look at how the data will be interpreted. The thing that I've spoke about before is the differences between quantitative and qualitative methodology. And then, of course, there's mixed methods. But the thing I want you to think about, a lot of students, one of the things I want to leave you with, a lot of students don't like statistics. I didn't like statistics. I didn't want to take statistics. I had to take statistics. I chose to do a qualitative case study because that's how I wanted to gather my information. My study was more closely related to a qualitative case study, multiple cases, not a single case study, whereas quantitative methods look at numbers, if you will. Qualitative methods look at collecting text or image-based data. Now, we can do both. If we choose to do that, it's a little more challenging, but we can do both, if you will, and have both numbers and some text-based data. And I did a survey, it was a qualitative research, but I used a little bit of mixed methods as well. Remember the purpose, some of the questions to ask yourself: what's the purpose, the nature of the process, how can the data be analyzed? Your background will help you determine whether or not you're going to do qualitative or quantitative research. And then you'll see the research methodology, which again, case study, design-based research. There's a lot of things that we do here, and it will be interesting to me how you conduct your research later on. I'm interested in how you do that. Validity of the research project, it's important. There's different ways to achieve validity. Validity means that the research is accurate, it's meaningful and credible. Based upon the research and how we conduct that, we demonstrate validity. That can be done by different ways. The way we collect the data, having our data reviewed, a review of the literature, etc. And you'll read more of that in your book. Triangulation, that's something that's important to look at, and that's how we compare those different data sources. For example, in my study, I used a review of the literature, I used some surveys, and then I asked the respondents in my study to look over what I had written based upon their interviews. And I did a survey and an interview, both. And so they did that. That allowed me to triangulate the data from those different sources to make sure it was all valid. But those are just some of the things I want you to take a look at. I know some of this may seem a little bit confusing right now. It may seem overwhelming. Just make sure you read that information. Stick with it, go through it, take some real good notes. One of the things that I like to do, and I've mentioned this, is to, just have a real good notebook. And this is just a little small one, but just have a good notebook to capture some of those ideas as you move forward. As I said before, you could have a 3-ring binder maybe to put the information in. But right now, I want you to just focus on reading the material. Pay close attention to chapters 4 and 10 this week. Look at those definitions. Make sure that you read the papers, the studies that are in there. Use those templates in my feedback to help you with the papers and the discussions, and keep rocking. Just keep moving forward. A lot of information here. If you have any questions, if you get confused about it, let me know, and I will do everything I can to possibly help you move forward. So again, good job on the papers, good job on the discussions. I'm really impressed with all the hard work you're doing. If you have any questions, let me know. Keep rocking. It's raining here today. The remnants of Hurricane Barry or Tropical Storm Barry are coming through, and everything's flooding again. It seems that this year's been a lot of flooding, so a little bit crazy. I'll be in the house working, grading your papers. Pick the phone up, call me, send me a text, email, and I'll do everything I can to help you on the projects and the assignments. Keep rocking, and thanks again for all that you do.